So welcome to our ADIA webinar. It's launch day today, which is an awesome day for us because we get to see everything going live. We're starting our first webinar today. However, we're just going to wait just a few seconds, really, just to make sure people have a chance to log on and get used to kind of like the first time we've used kind of StreamYard for this. So we're going to get a few seconds and then we'll launch in and introduce our guest who is happily waiting for us there. Although we're very excited by launch day. Okay, I think that's enough time. So welcome to our first webinar. Today we're going to be introducing Helen, who is a resident functional nutritionist from Cytoplan Vitamins. We're very excited to introduce this guest simply because we've used Cytoplan for many years ourselves and we love vitamin supplements and we can't wait to ask her a few questions. So hello, Helen, and we'd like to say if you can give us a little bit of a background on yourself and a little bit of background on Cytoplan itself.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for inviting me along. I'm really excited to be here, especially on your first session. So that's really cool. Thank you. So I'm Helen Drake. I'm a nutritional therapist. My original degree was in biological science, and I worked for 11 years in research. And during that time, I sort of wasn't that happy in that role and retrained in nutritional therapy. So I then worked in private practice, did a bit of lecturing at the College of Naturopathic Medicine, and then I've been working for Cytoplan for about just over 5 years now. And I do kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, so it's mainly technical support, a lot of technical writing, also responsible for a lot of our continuing practitioner development education and that sort of thing. Generally, if you ask the company a question, it's usually me that it comes to. There are a couple of us, but yeah, so I sort of do a bit of everything, which is lovely because it keeps it really interesting. And Cytoplan are a UK-owned company, and we specialise in whole food and food state nutrients. And the ethos behind that is that the nutrients are in the form that they're found in food. Mm-hmm. And we have lots of evidence that shows that makes them highly bioavailable and bioeffective. And we don't necessarily need to megadose them because the body recognises them as a food-based nutrient. Mm-hmm. So they're well recognised, well absorbed and utilised within the body. So yeah, you don't need to megadose them. So they're very well tolerated as well.
And Cytoplan, as far as we know, is also owned by a charitable foundation. That's right, isn't it? So it's...
Yeah, that's right. So we're owned by, so originally we were set up by a group of practitioners that wanted really clean, excipient-free supplements. And so Cytoplan was, Nature's Own was founded, and then Cytoplan was also born out of that, and Cytoplan then became the parent company. And basically the company bought out its own shares and sort of donated the company to the AIM Foundation. So at the end of every financial year, X amount of our profits are given to the AIM Foundation. So we're not a charity ourselves. We are a profit-making company, but so we will reinvest in the company, but X amount of our profits. So I think last year, I think it's about 200,000 was given back to the AIM Foundation.
And you support a lot of charities, don't you? I think when you looked at all the charities, you support a lot of different charities.
Yeah. So although the AIM Foundation is a charity, what it does is it gives money to other projects. Yeah. So it's doesn't sort of focus on one particular disease or anything like that. It sort of looks at, its tagline is to improve the health of the nation. So it will look at various projects, and give money to those, I guess, as it sees fit. So
it's a really nice loop, though, isn't it? Because you've got the whole food supplement mixed into kind of looking after the charity side as well. It's a really nice loop round. We we believe the same thing in ADIA. Really have to do the same as you go into a loop. Interesting when you're talking about the whole food, it does ask a question really from me, and that is a lot of my patients ask me about like recommended daily amount, RDA, and the amount you see kind of on a vitamin. Yeah. And those percentages can greatly vary from being very low to something being really high. Yeah. And maybe give like a better answer to that really as to what
definitely. Yeah. So the RDAs, and they changed, they're also called NRVs, RNIs, they're all very similar. They're designed to prevent a deficiency of any one nutrient across a population. So make sure that we don't get a deficiency disease. So if you think about the deficiency disease of vitamin D, it's rickets. Mm-hmm. So you'll have the RDA, which will mean that that's recommended for everyone to take so that no one in the population develops rickets. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those levels of nutrients are optimum levels of vitamin D. So they're sort of aimed to sort of be adequate levels that prevent us from suffering from
just
a
stop you
disease.
getting the disease, basically, and the amount that you would have after that would bring benefit. So there's a lot more benefit to health than just stopping you getting rickets. In the example of vitamin D.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a lot of work looking at what those optimum levels should be. So we've worked with Dr. Paul Clayton, who sort of evaluated loads and loads of different studies. I think it was 10,000 in the end, to look at levels that we need for actual, what we call optimal wellness. So you're getting absolutely every sort of nutrient that you need for your body systems to be functioning as well as they possibly can be. And those are generally quite a bit higher than the RDAs and the RNIs.
And if we ask you about something which I think you talk about on your website, the nutrition gap, which I think is something that most people are aware of as to why we don't get all our nutrients from our diet. So a lot of people ask that question, why can't we get all our nutrients from our diet now?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of factors that affect, what we call the nutrition gap, which is this difference between what we're getting from our food and what we need to like be living as well as we can. Firstly, it's soil depletion. So there's not enough nutrients in the soil anyway. And that's because of over farming, other things, use of pesticides, early harvesting and ripening, transportation and storage of our food. You know, we're no longer growing foods in like a really nutrient-rich soil, waiting until they've grown and then picking them and eating them straight away. There's a long tail kind of
I hear bananas are a year and apples are 2, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing the effects of that now, aren't we? And what's happening. Also, it's pretty well understood that we evolved as hunter-gatherers. Mm-hmm. So when we were hunter-gatherers, we were actually expending around about 4,000 calories per day, which is surprising because we actually kind of think that we're eating more than we used to. We're actually eating less, but we're so much more sedentary.
Yeah.
So we've cut our calorie intake down to about a half of that, roughly, give or take. And we need to because we're not as active, but that means we've also cut our micronutrient intake by half. Yeah. So we're not actually consuming the same amount of food as we did before, and the food we are consuming is less nutrient dense. Mm-hmm. And then you've got factors like stress, smoking, medications, toxins. All these things will increase our need for certain nutrients.
And does that need vary by person? Is there a difference in different people as to what nutrients they need?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's quite hard. I mean, there's sort of a standard what we, from all these studies that we've looked at optimal levels, but somebody that's highly stressed, for example, will use up magnesium really quickly. So they'll probably have a high need for magnesium. And you get little indications that they might not be getting enough in their diet. And obviously you can do testing, but normally just looking at someone's diet,
isn't it?
Yeah. And look at someone's diet, what's going on. And I find normally if they're deficient in one, they're probably deficient, if they're deficient in magnesium, they're probably deficient in zinc, vitamin C, etc. Because those foods, they're coming from sort of similar food bases.
Yeah. You just see also differences where we live as well. Because I mean, we're quite north, so we don't get as much sunlight. Even though people say, vitamin D, you only take it during winter. I always think, well, I don't know about your summer, but mine's definitely about 3 days long. So we always ask the question, maybe, we should take them all the time. But also, I would always say where we are, definitely should take vitamin D all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
If it was in the Caribbean, I might,
And you can get your levels very easily checked, but it's a really good one to consider in the UK because, around 60% of the year, we don't get enough light to make good vitamin D. So, and I think if you work indoors like we do,
so it feels like 80.
It does feel a lot more.
And we've been taught to, like, when we go out in the sun, put sun cream on, which is important, obviously, for other reasons, but then we need that UV exposure. I think I might be making this up. I thought anywhere north of Birmingham, everybody's like, there probably isn't enough sun during the sunlight during the summer.
Well, we definitely feel like that.
We definitely. Well, you almost feel it. You pass Birmingham, that's it. You can almost feel it fleeting. Definitely, I'd say everyone should take it. But also, I think it's the opposite effect. People always wonder, can you overdose vitamins? Yeah. And I think you kind of get this medication answer, don't you? Almost like, you can overdose medication. Can you take, so many vitamins? You have a problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, difficult. It's very difficult to do that. Your fat soluble vitamins, so A, C, not C, sorry, A, D, E, and K. It's like my day. Don't give up the day. No, they're fat soluble, so they're stored within the body. So there's a sort of theory you can overdose in vitamin D, but there's no sort of real clinical evidence that that's really happened to anybody. Probably the one you have to be most careful with is vitamin A. So you can get toxic levels, but not many people are getting enough
Actually,
of
a lot
that.
of people are becoming deficient now because of the fear around vitamin A, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're actually often seeing the opposite, particularly with the fears around pregnancy and other things, that vitamin A has become a bit demonized because of it. So
yeah, absolutely. And the same happened with vitamin E, and that was more because if you're just supplementing one form of vitamin E, like alpha tocopherol on its own, that can be pro-oxidative. But when it's in a food complex state, then it's an antioxidant. So there's sort of little caveats. You do have to be aware of certain things when you're supplementing.
Knowing the best forms. I think Cytoplan often has what I really like about it is you have very good forms of your vitamins.
Yeah.
So like vitamin E, you do tocotrienols and and tocopherols, you do them together in a mix, and that's unusual. And it's a really great supplement because it gives you a variety of different types of vitamin E, which are much better for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're always aiming to do. We're all, when we talk about our food state and whole food ethos, we're giving that nutrient in the form that it's found in food, so it's well recognized by the body and it treats it like a food. So it's really, really difficult to overdose. I haven't seen any sort of evidence of that.
My patients don't react to your vitamins in the same way they have done. I've seen before. Sometimes people can take a lot of one type of vitamin, but with yours, because I find they're better blended, they seem to absorb them better. They seem to have a better reaction to them. They tolerate them better. Yeah,
and we're really discerning at trying to make sure it's in the best, bioavailable form, and also in this sort of food state complex. So it's well tolerated and effective. That's what we're aiming to do.
Is there a top supplement that you think, something that is one of the ones that you sell most of, that you think people?
There's a few. I mean, I think the top selling one, which I also use it a lot, and it's one of my favorites, is the CoQ10 multi, because I use it with nearly everybody. I give that because we like to bridge the nutrition gap, make sure there's optimum levels of nutrients. So it's a really good multi with good levels in whole food form. It has high levels of B vitamins, which are really great for energy production, and it has B vitamins in the most active form. So folic acid is in methylfolate form, B12 is methyl and well absorbed, and it has a high level of CoQ10. CoQ10 is great for energy production. It's an antioxidant. It's really
good for people on statins, good for heart health.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's got some beta glucans which support the immune system as well. So it's a great overall support, and it's the one we give out quite a lot because people notice the difference when they take it. So we give it away for free and go, try that one.
I think we talked briefly before, and I think we discovered that I really like one of your supplements you're not so sure about. I think Cytonite, that I use a lot, that I think is fantastic for sleep. I think maybe it's a bit strong sometimes, but I think that one I find is
I like it. I've used it sometimes. With sleep, I sort of chop and change, and I find with sleep it works. Some things work really well for some people, and I think it's the neurotransmitter that's affected. So Cytonite,
people.
And Cytonite contains Montmorency cherry, which is a natural source of melatonin.
Yeah.
So if your issue with sleeping is that you're not producing enough adequate levels of melatonin, then it's really helpful.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting the differences of that, really, because you've always said that Cytonite, you take it more for kind of going to sleep. And I would always say I take it more for kind of depth of sleep, because I can sleep really well, but I can sleep a very long time. Yeah. But interestingly, with Cytonite, I get a shorter period, but I feel like I'm going into a coma. I feel like I've really come out of it incredibly well.
Okay.
So it's kind of, it's knowing, how does it kind of do that? How does it kind of change how you sleep?
Yeah.
I suppose that must be the melatonin.
It's the same comment that we're getting there. I think that some people find it's like a magic switch for them, that it works really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to depend on what's the thing that's, causing you to have sleep issues. Is it melatonin production? The other one is GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter. And it's a real sort of general rule of thumb that melatonin issues, it'll be more a problem getting to sleep, whereas GABA will be staying asleep.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that's quite a sort of,
it's a really calming thing.
But
GABA's out of it. We use it in one of our teas in our clinic, in our Chinese teas, and we would say GABA's a beautifully relaxing thing. It's really amazing. You can take it in supplement form, or you can take it in tea, but it works really nicely just to calm people down. Yeah,
and it's great for anxiety in general. It's not a it's not a sort of sedative.
Yeah,
it's just calming. So it's really nice. I quite like L-theanine, which is obviously the precursor it supports GABA production. So
yeah, again, nice and relaxing, and
Yeah.
all of those can really, and you do them. Cytoplan does them in lots of different forms, but I like the fact that some of them are nice combinations, which we find as well. We like the Cytonite's great, but we also like the turmeric combinations that you do, things like PhytoShield, which
Yeah.
for anti-inflammatory support that we found really, really helpful as well for patients.
Yeah, definitely. I use the cell active curcumin a lot. So which
it's a type of turmeric.
Yeah, so turmeric's great, but has a very low bioavailability, so it's not really absorbed in the gut very easily. So we've taken curcumin, which is the active sort of constituent within turmeric, with gingerols, which also, so both of those are anti-inflammatory, and encapsulated them in a liposome, which is like a fat molecule. So it's able to be absorbed as a fat, so it's transported across the gut lining intact, and it can also cross the blood-brain barrier. So that really improves its bioavailability and makes it, work really, really nicely as an anti-inflammatory. And that's, when you said your favourite product, I nearly said that one. That's one of my.
To be fair, it's one of the ones I use most, probably, because for joint complaints, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be that I'd push everyone towards glucosamine, but actually recently we found that going towards a curcumin kind of idea and turmeric, you can get a much better reaction almost.
Yeah.
But research is starting to show now that it almost works as well as ibuprofen after a period of time. I mean, its anti-inflammatory effects are phenomenal. Without any of the side effects.
So there's quite a lot of studies that I've seen that, because it inhibits the COX-2 expression, which is what non-steroidals are like aiming at. But you don't get
things like aspirin and ibuprofen do the same pathway.
So but you're not getting those sort of gut damaging side effects. So it's lovely. In fact, it supports healing and repair of the gut lining. So it's a great one.
If you asked you what we would say, if you were looking for a good supplement, if you were looking to take a supplement, would there be things that you'd look at that would make it stand out to you as being something you'd want to take, or things that you want to avoid?
Yeah, so definitely, if you look at the list of ingredients, and there's a load of sort of things that sound like chemicals, so they're generally bulking agents, excipients, fillers, binders. Try and avoid them as much as possible. The other thing, it's hard without going through a whole list of what they are, but you want to, if you know a little bit about it, you want to look at the form those nutrients are in. So minerals are best. Ours are in whole food form, so it's a little bit different. But if it's a synthetic mineral, they're best bound to a citrate or a glucosinolate or something like that, or picolinate, as opposed to, if you see oxide or generally sulfates sometimes as well afterwards, they're not generally the best form. Do look at the percentage of the RDAs, but again, that's, unless you know what you're doing, that's not. I always look
at my B vitamins. I think I always start there. I think the B vitamins help me when I'm looking at the back of a pack to see whether I think that's good, and I look at the forms that they're in, whether they're in a methylated form or a decent form that way. Yeah,
exactly. And definitely. So like if you see folic acid, I generally opt for more methylfolate, and that kind of tells you that there's more discerning about the sort of bioavailability and the activity of that nutrient.
It'll also be a kind of a way of also absorbing it, because taking it, because I get a lot of patients who take ones, like a multivitamin, but it all dissolves in water, and so they'll take a big tablet and throw it in water, and they go, I've taken a multivitamin. And I always think, surely you wouldn't want to do that.
Fat soluble—that's like not absorbed.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to be. It's why we have some trouble making certain formulations. It's quite difficult because, like you say, if you've got vitamin D is a fat soluble nutrient, so it won't dissolve in water. Vitamin E is the same, and vitamin A. So if it is effervescent, it probably is not a fully encompassing nutrient. And usually, to make it fizz and dissolve in water, you have to add other things to make it do that.
Make it easier.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so sort of be aware. Generally, the ones that are best for you don't really taste very nice.
No, we find that too. And if we've got a question, I think there about inflammation. If there was some supports that you think we've talked a little bit about turmeric there, but
I mean, I'd definitely go for look at the form of curcumin, but cell active curcumin is a good one without one push it too much. Definitely omega-3 fatty acids. So a good quality fish oil or krill, or if you can get a vegan omega-3 as well, as long as it's in. You want for omega-3s, you want to look for EPA and DHA. Those are the active forms of omega-3.
Or fish-based, or possibly algae. There.
Yeah, fish oil. So if you're a vegan, it needs to be an algae source to have those active ingredients. I mean, flaxseed oil is great, but the body needs to convert it, and it's not very efficient at converting flaxseed oil into the active forms of omega-3, particularly depending on what else you're eating. So
yeah,
yeah,
a great question actually, because it's something that I've taken for years. I've always taken krill oil. My patients still come in and say, "Oh, I'm taking fish oil," and I go, "I'd always take the krill." Just because personally I don't eat particularly a huge amount of fish. That's why I've always taken a lot of krill, but also I always found that krill oil just works kind of better for me.
The reason I think is for that is the krill and our vegan omega-3 is in a phospholipid form as opposed to a triglyceride. So generally when you eat, without getting into biochemistry, generally you eat fat, it's in a triglyceride form, which is a sort of what would look like a solid fat, I guess, if you could see it on a plate or at least an oil. So to be absorbed, it needs to be emulsified, because obviously in the gut's a water friendly environment, so we need bile acids to come in and break it apart and make it water soluble or emulsify it. If it's in the phospholipid form, it has a nice little phosphate attached to the fatty acid, and that makes it water soluble, so that it really aids its absorption. You kind of bypass the need for the gallbladder and the bile to be working effectively.
And obviously a number of people who haven't got enough bile when you test them, and when you look through it, they haven't got bile in the right form. It's not as easy.
Absolutely.
Or no gallbladder, which is also very common. Yes.
Because they like whipping them out, don't they? So and that can be a real issue. I'm sure you guys find it as well for fatty acid deficiency. When people have gallbladder issues.
Digestion in
then
general,
it has this knock-on effect for everything else.
And I think we have a question from Katie, and she asks if there's as you know, that's one of the most common questions I get asked as well. Is there a best time of day you should take your vitamins?
If you're talking about multi with B vitamins in, I would always take it in the morning, because B vitamins are really good at providing you with energy. So in theory, I haven't really tried this myself. I always take it in the morning, but in theory, it could sort of wake you up if you take it before bed because of the high B vitamins. I think that's sort of one of those.
I take mine before bed every night.
Well, if it doesn't, if it doesn't affect you,
it can be a digestion side. So I would always say that the only reason I take mine at night is because they can just slightly upset my stomach if I take it in the morning. I always think it's because, well, I'm not awake. So
and I wouldn't take it on an empty stomach, having said that. So I'd take it after. I generally take mine after breakfast.
Interaction wise, I guess also if you don't want to take it around all the medications, it kind of would depend on if you're taking anything else at the same time, or if you want to take it, but you do want to take it on a full stomach, do you, with an empty stomach? Or
most of them, multivitamins. What I tend to avoid with I usually recommend probiotics before bed, because you can take them with food and they will still work, but you don't really want loads of food coming in afterwards, sort of flushing them through. So I usually recommend any sort of gut probiotics and a couple of other gut products to take just before bed, so you're not sort of eating straight afterwards. And it depends. If you're taking something to calm you down for bed, then you'll take that obviously beforehand. Magnesium is really nice before bed. So it kind of depends on the product. There's some that you have to take with food. But I find if you take things like fish oils on an empty stomach, you'll get a lot of reflux. It'll be pretty uncomfortable. So you want to make sure you've kind of eaten first.
No, I think that's true. Definitely true.
Yeah, definitely.
And
I'd like to go to a couple of conditions if we can. So just because I treat a lot of joint pain and back pain, I'd love to know what your viewpoint would be. What supplements you go towards that. I suppose it'd be similar really towards kind of exercise and muscles, but anything really that would help with those, what would you advise?
I would always use a multi as a base first, as I've mentioned. Curcumin, I've talked about. If you don't do curcumin, we also do a boswellia, which is an anti-inflammatory herb, and it's very targeted at joint and muscle pain. I use it more for things like osteoarthritis, or if there's an injury, because it seems to be more for acute or localized pain and inflammation. Where
it's got some fantastic research behind it, really great research.
Whereas curcumin is more systemic, so things like fibromyalgia,
joints.
But when you say joint pain, it sort of depends on what's going on, obviously, in the individual.
Sometimes boswellia, I think, works where I think turmeric doesn't. I find. I don't know.
I know, and it's sort of one of those things that I was talking about sleep. Sometimes you just get a kind of feeling that that's going to work better for that person. Definitely fish oil, and I definitely support the gut, because that helps to reduce systemic inflammation. and just because, gut health, magnesium. And then you can look at things like glucosamine to aid repair. Sorry, I'm making the list really long.
No, it's fine. That's right. It's interesting that I find that, the ones you're also recommending for anti-inflammatory are also ones that do naturally improve digestion as well. So you can see that link between the pain of the gut straight away.
Yeah, definitely.
And are there any supplements that shouldn't go together? Is there anything that shouldn't go together? Shouldn't take at the same time?
So if you're using something like an antimicrobial herb, so we do one called caprylic acid that you'll give for things like candida or bacterial overgrowth in the gut, then I wouldn't give that at the same time as probiotic, because you're sort of killing off the live bacteria. Anything else?
People often ask me about iron. I think they often ask me whether iron's a problem with the different vitamins.
It's fine. It's okay to multi. It's good with, well, if you're eating, it's good to have vitamin C with iron. Iron, zinc and copper will compete for absorption. So, if you are iron deficient, it's probably best to take away from zinc or copper. But it's also, it's kind of nice for maintenance to give them all together, so the body's not favoritizing one over the other. So it kind of depends what you're looking at doing. Otherwise there probably is some, and I'm drawing a blank, but generally I usually generally give them most at the same time, because I find it aids compliance. We're entering our last few minutes now, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to bring them up into the comments, and we'll ask as many as we can. Also, I do have a break though. I'm going to ask you another question myself, I'm afraid. So I'd like to know, I have a lot of patients who have high cholesterol, and I'd love to know what supports you'd give alongside that. Because they're often taking a statin or blood pressure medication, but is there anything supplement-wise you'd add in? So I was looking at supporting the gut and the liver, because the gut's responsible for excretion of cholesterol, and if we can have issues with the liver, because the liver is actually manufacturing cholesterol, so is there a liver issue? So definitely loads of fiber, and you can take supplements that will help provide fiber, things like psyllium husks, to help move things through the gut, because if someone's constipated, they're going to be reabsorbing their sort of waste cholesterol. If they're on a statin, then you want to look at definitely giving CoQ10, because statins will inhibit the production of CoQ10, and then you get the
really important to give that in quite a good dosage as well.
That's what makes you tired, isn't it? Makes your muscles ache, isn't it? It's when the CoQ10 goes down with the statin.
It's really important for basically energy production. And the other thing I quite like giving an omega-3, because omega-3 will raise HDL as well. So obviously with cholesterol, the trouble is it's a bit of a caveat, because it raises total cholesterol, and the doctors don't tend to like that. But if
your HDL balance is good now, it's getting better, the system, at looking at the fact that your HDL, your good cholesterol carrier, that's the one that they want to look at there. And I think if that raises, they're less worried than they used to be a lot of the time.
Get in there.
And then you have some natural supports, things like red rice yeast extract, which I know is, is a kind of a natural form of a statin, but you can use it alongside if they're struggling to control.
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually use that as a last sort of resort, because I don't really like sort of completely cutting down cholesterol. The brain needs a lot of cholesterol as well.
So if someone's got a familial condition, or they've got something that's finding it difficult to control it, but yes, cholesterol is very important, and we don't want to bring it down to naught.
So it's one of those fine lines. But yes, basically red rice yeast is I always make sure I get the rice and the yeast round the other way. It acts as a natural statin, and the one we do actually has CoQ10 in it. So if you're taking,
it's a lovely form of it, actually. I would say.
So it's really nice. It works nicely, but I try to do it with sort of diet and gut support. And everything else.
The best thing about vitamins, really, isn't it, is that they can often go alongside medication that you're taking, and they often can just almost like make you feel better. If you're on
they can enhance your diet, really, rather than being something you're taking like a pill every day. You're taking something to enhance your diet, something that if your body needs extra nutrients, they're there for it.
Definitely. And we definitely advocate, diet is food is our primary medicine, and then it's adding other things on top. So we would never suggest that vitamins and minerals will replace a good diet. There's no replacement for that, but it's sort of an adjunct to that as such. And with medications, most of them aren't affected generally by vitamins and minerals, but some you have to really be careful of, particularly warfarin is the big one.
Luckily it's being used less than it used to be now, so it's getting a bit easier.
No, that's great. Exactly, and there's lots of other things you can do. There are certain ones I do often get asked, can they take this medication with this product? So it's quite easy to do. Go on drugs.com or Medscape, and you can actually just plug in what you're taking, and it will tell you if there's an interaction. If you're
and can you ask a Cytoplan if they rang up and asked? Would they be able?
Yeah, we do that quite a lot. So yeah, you can always contact us as well, and we can check those for you. And in our catalogue, there's sort of general contraindications that you come across frequently.
Brilliant. Perfect. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Helen. So we really appreciate you coming on to our webinar all about vitamins, and we really enjoyed talking to you about Cytoplan vitamins and, of course, everything about them. And your knowledge has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining our webinar, and we hope to talk
thank you.
soon.
It's been great.
We'd love to invite you back. And thank you for everyone else for also joining us and listening. We'll do more of these in the future. And if you want any more information, please visit our sections and zones, and you'll find information on vitamins and supplements.
And lots of recommendations for different ones.
Yes. Perfect.